Practiced wildly across Europe during the Middle Ages, breaking on the wheel was a particularly brutal way to publicly inflict enormous amounts of pain on someone before killing them. The last known reported case of wheeling was performed in Prussia for the murder of the Bishop of Ermland in 1841. Step 1. Convict someone of a crime. Of course, not forgetting to prescribe the requisite amount of suffering. Tell the executioner to break the criminal top down, quicker, or bottom up to prolong the agony. Step 2. Find a car wheel. Place person on top. Step 3. Break the poor bastard's limbs with a giant mallet. Best to pay for an experienced executioner. Wouldn't want them to bleed out prematurely. Step 4. If allowed by the sentencing magistrate, provide the coup de grace by hitting the victim with your giant mallet on the chest. Prevalent throughout the ancient world, right up to the modern day, burning a person alive for crimes real or imagined has a long and depressing history. The Romans would crucify criminals in the Colosseum, their clothes soaked in oil so that when nighttime fell they, while still alive, could be lit on fire to provide lighting for the evening's continuing entertainment. Of course, thousands of so-called heretics and witches were burned in Europe during the Reformation and Counter-Reformation. If you recanted on the stake, perhaps you would be shown a mercy by having a bag of gunpowder strapped to your groin or armpit, or else strangled first with a rope. If the condemned remained obstinate, a good executioner could prolong the torment by using damp kindling. During our good friend Henry VIII's reign, several heretics were burned for reading the Bible in English. For a laugh, Henry would later change his mind and himself authorize an English Bible translation to be read in church. To be drawn or dragged to your place of execution, hung to the point of death, disemboweled and then cut to pieces, was a particular English speciality, although the French did put a sexy twist to proceedings by quartering the condemned not with an axe or sword, but by attaching the limbs to a set of horses, and thus pulling the body apart as the horses galloped away. Such was the horrific nature of this method of execution, the condemned might unsurprisingly take measures to expedite proceedings. Guy Fawkes, him, as we have said, of the gunpowder plot, brilliantly managed to escape his jailers and dive headlong off the gibbet, and in doing so broke his neck before he could endure the torture of being hung and disemboweled. And Major General Thomas Harrison, one of the regicides guilty of signing the death warrant of Charles I in 1649, was, upon the restoration of the dead king's son Charles II, brought to trial in 1660 and sentenced to be hung, drawn and quartered. No less brilliantly, he, after being hung, leant over and punched his executioner in the face. Suitably enraged, the man proceeded to decapitate Harrison, thus for Harrison ensuring a quick death, his bowels intact and unburnt. Find an insane, brutal, inhumane way to kill someone, and you will find the Assyrians, if nothing else, perhaps because they wouldn't shut up about it. I flayed as many nobles as have rebelled against me, and draped their skins over the pile of corpses. Some I spread out within the pile, some I erected on stakes upon the pile. I flayed many right through my land, and draped their skins over the walls. And the Persians also. When dealing with a corrupt judge, the second king of kings, Cambyses II, Herodotus writes, had the man flayed alive, and, to encourage better conduct in the condemned man's successors, had his skin draped over his judge's chair. Not that his successor might forget this judge's fate, however, as it was the man's son who would succeed him as judge, and thus had to sit on his father's skin during work hours. Used as a byword for despotism and cruelty within the ancient world, Phalaris, the tyrant of 6th century BC Sicily, was presented with the brazen bull as a novel method of torture and execution by a particularly enterprising court sculptor. The contraption was just as advertised, a huge hollowed-out bronze bull big enough to hold a grown man who, locked inside, could be slowly roasted with the age of a huge fire lit underneath. It also had one exciting addition, an intricate pipe system that transformed the occupant's screams into a loud mooing noise, mainly, I think, because Phalaris was a psychotic and he would have found that funny. Anyway, the tyrant convinced Perilaus, the sculptor, to climb in and demonstrate its size, at which point Phalaris locked the contraption shut and set a fire underneath. And on he went, making extensive use of his demented toy until he was eventually overthrown in 554 BC, and yes, promptly thrown into his own bull and roasted alive.